What's going on, everybody? Thanks for watching another one of our student ministry lessons. This week we are doing week 4 of our Mission Possible series. So for the past few weeks, we've been talking about kind of a secret agent, secret mission spy movie kind of theme. And when we think about all of the spy movies that we enjoy, our spies typically have something along the lines of, gadgets, and cool things that help them accomplish their mission. And that's what the point of those gadgets is, to help them be prepared for anything. And when we think about preparation and getting ready for things, there's two kind of categories that I think we all fall in. The first category is, some of us prepare in painstaking detail for any situation, everything that we're going to have to face. And that's typically the side that I fall under. And the other side is some of us just kind of run out the door with hardly any preparation at all, just kind of jump into things. And so, neither one of those is bad. I think we typically, we might do both, but we kind of have one that we usually do. And so, what about you? Are you usually prepared, maybe even over prepared for things, or do you just kind of jump in? Well, either way, today I kind of want to talk about what preparation has to do with our mission to tell the world about Jesus. And we've been talking about how this mission that we're on, it's not impossible, but you know what? It does require preparation. So, for the last few weeks, we've actually been doing some preparation. We've talked about how if you want to join Jesus on this mission, that we're going to have to be real, that we have to be helpful, and we have to be a listener. But there's one more thing that you have to be, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So when Jesus gave us this mission, when he said, go and make disciples, he was speaking directly to his closest friends and followers. And one of those people was Peter. And Peter was one of Jesus's first disciples. And some people describe Peter as being hot-headed. So Peter was the kind of guy to just jump into things wholeheartedly, maybe not a lot of preparation or planning involved. And you know what? That can be a great quality, but it also meant that Peter was a little impulsive at times. Some of the stories that we hear about Peter kind of describe him as pretty impulsive. So Peter's story with Jesus, it actually began when Jesus saw him fishing with his brother, and Jesus called Peter. He was like, hey, follow me. And Peter's like, okay, and just, dropped his nets and followed Jesus. And once when the disciples were in a boat out in the middle of a lake, and they saw Jesus walking on the water, everyone was terrified. But Peter was like, hey, Jesus, what if I just walked out there with you? And he got out of the boat and started walking on the water to Jesus. But then he panicked and he started to sink. And luckily, Jesus saved him. And then just before Jesus was betrayed and arrested and sentenced to death, he predicted that his disciples would deny him and abandon him. And now Peter passionately promised to Jesus, like, he would never deny him. He wouldn't abandon him no matter what. But you know what? Jesus was right. Hours later, Peter denied several times that he even knew Jesus. And when we think about Peter, Jesus could have seen Peter's impulsiveness as a problem, right? But Jesus saw something else in Peter too. As hot-headed as Peter could be, as impulsive as he could be, he was also a passionate disciple of Jesus. When Jesus asked his disciples who they thought he was, Peter was the first to say, like, you're the Messiah. He said, you are the Christ, which is what we, believe Jesus as. But Peter was the first one to, of his disciples to say, this is who you are. And even when Jesus gave Peter his name, Peter's name was originally Simon, but Jesus started calling Peter Peter because the name Peter actually means rock. And Jesus promised Peter that he would be a foundational part of the church that Jesus was building, just like a rock is part of a foundation. And so Peter had his flaws, but one of the reasons he was such an effective disciple of Jesus is that he was always ready to take action. He was always ready to just jump in and be a part of the mission of Jesus. And so over time, Peter grew, he matured, and he eventually became an important leader in the church, just like Jesus had said he would. And so after Jesus left earth, his disciples were carrying out the mission and making disciples, and the church grew. And as it grew, leaders like Peter, they faced new challenges. It wasn't enough just to share the gospel with their friends and family and the people right around them. They needed to find a way to teach and disciple faraway communities of new Jesus followers as the gospel was spreading. Now, the Roman government, they did not like this new religion spreading all over its empire. The Roman Empire was all over, and it was powerful, and they were threatening and imprisoning and even killing Christians in order to prevent this new faith from spreading. So that was kind of the big problem that the leaders in the early church were facing. So Peter wrote a letter to several communities of Jesus followers. And now that's a letter we call First Peter in the Bible. And now Peter wrote this to encourage fellow believers. Their mission was turning out to be a lot more difficult than maybe they expected because of the threat of the Roman Empire. But Peter wanted them to know that their mission was still worth it. No matter what difficulties they faced, the hope that they had in Jesus was still worth sharing. It was worth talking about. So later in this letter, Peter shared more insights about how Jesus followers could carry out their mission. As we read Peter's advice to the church, just keep in mind how hot-headed and impulsive Peter used to be. And when we read this, it's going to seem like Peter has grown quite a bit. So the passage that we're going to look at in First Peter is in chapter 3. It's going to be verses 8 through 17. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. So it says, "Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil." Now, there's so many things we could take from this text, but I love Peter's advice here, and his advice to fellow believers is this. He says to be ready, and that's our main point for today. That's the last thing that we're talking about that we need to be when it comes to being on this mission of Jesus. It is to be ready. We have to be ready to act and be ready to speak. Just like what we've been saying for the last few weeks, Peter reminded his fellow believers that they must share the gospel with their actions and their words. In fact, he says if our lives are characterized by hope, love, and compassion, Peter says that their actions would give them opportunities to talk about their faith. And that's exactly what we've been saying over these past few lessons. Now, as we go through these few verses, I think there are quite a few ways Peter says that we can be ready to talk about the good news of Jesus. The first way that we can be ready is by loving each other. Our love for others is different from the rest of the world, and our love demonstrates the love of God. A second thing he says we can do is to repay evil with good. Now, this isn't natural, but that's exactly why it's important. Anyone can repay someone who is rude with being rude, or insults with insults, or anger with anger. But followers of Jesus are called to live differently from the rest of the world. And so we have to repay evil with good. Another thing Peter says is that we should not be afraid. We should be bold and trust God with whoever he's calling us to speak to and whatever words he's telling us to say. And another thing that he says to be ready is to have an answer. Peter said that when we live in a way that's different from the rest of the world, that people are going to ask why, why we're so filled with hope, like what reason we have to have this hope in Jesus. And so we have to be ready to answer them. And I think it's really cool as we read through these verses to see how Peter has grown. Jesus transformed Peter's life in a huge way, and he can do the same for you and me. Because I think we're all worried that we're not qualified or capable of joining Jesus on this mission, or that we're not going to be ready when he calls us. But we are. And so being ready takes preparation. Like Peter said, we have to always be ready to have a conversation about Jesus. Because just like Philip in the lesson last week, we never know when we're going to have an opportunity to share. So that means we have to prepare by knowing what we're going to say, how we're going to say it. And that comes from reading the Bible and talking with other Christians that have been able to share their faith, and we can learn lessons from them as well. So some things that we're called to do, we're called to join Jesus's mission by sharing the good news of the gospel. We're called to share that good news. We're also called to be ready at all times, because we don't know exactly when God is going to give us someone to talk to about the message of Jesus. And so we can share with confidence, with gentleness and respect. And that comes from, sharing with our actions and sharing with our words. And the last thing that we're called to do is we're called to trust God with the outcome. We can't make anyone become a true follower of Jesus. So we just have to trust what God is doing in their hearts. So our mission this week is to be ready. These past few weeks, we've talked about a lot of different ways that we can be more effective in our mission of following Jesus. The first way is by being real. We said that the world needs us to be real. People don't need to see Christians who are perfect, because we're not. They need to see Jesus followers who are authentic. The world also needs us to be helpful by showing and telling about the love of Jesus. The world needs us to be listeners. We have to learn how to listen well to God and to others to know how to better share about the gospel and meet people's needs. And lastly, the world needs us to be ready. People are looking for answers, for love, for meaning and hope. And those are all things they can find in Jesus. And because we're followers of Jesus, we're going to have opportunities to help others find the same hope that we have found. So are you ready? Are you going to accept this mission that Jesus has sent us on? I hope you will. And one thing that we have to do when we accept this mission is we have to be ready. And then we get to watch what God is going to do through all of us. It takes a lot of preparation and a lot of effort, but we get to be on this mission with Jesus and with other Jesus followers. And that's really exciting.